Welcome to the latest episode of From the BO End, the Burnley podcast. And this is a special one for you. It's our first episode with a guest, and what a guest we have for you this time. And can't wait to get going on this one, because Burnley fans who remember the early 1990s at Turf Moor, well, Roger Eli needs no introduction to you if you were around at that time. And today's show should bring back some warm memories for you. For those of you who weren't yet Clarets supporters at that time, we hope this show will give you some real insight into what really has to be considered a crucial period of Burnley's history. The rise out of the 4th Division, culminating in that memorable title win in 1992, ended the club's 7 years in the bottom division and launched Burnley back on the path to the top level. It may have taken another 23 years to get to the Premier League, but without the efforts of Jimmy Mullen's team that season, including the goals of Roger Eli, that journey may never have begun. Roger scored 31 goals in 96 appearances for Burnley, but in many ways those numbers don't do justice to the significance of what he became at Burnley. Many refer to him as a cult hero, but I prefer to say he's simply one of the most loved Burnley players of our lifetimes, whose skill and flair finally brought excitement and thrills back to Turf Moor after some miserable years. Roger, welcome to the show, and I guess my first question is, how do you feel when you look back on that time?
With fondness. When I look back at Burnley, I would say we're fortunate as well, because I absolutely still love the place, love the club, the supporters as well. So it took a while for me to get over, when I left the club. That's how deep, I was fond of the club. So yeah, just loved my time there. I really did.
Well, no, Andrew has some questions to kick us off about your start as a footballer and the early part of your life. So, Andrew, fire away.
Yeah, hi Roger. How are you, mate?
I'm fine, Andrew. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, mate. I wanted to kind of touch on kind of early football careers, because Burnley, probably aside from Crewe, was your kind of first club where you it felt like you'd put roots down. But I wanted to kind of go right back to the start, if you will, to them early days as a schoolboy with Nottingham Forest, and probably the top one, I think he used to describe himself, greatest manager of all time, Mr. Brian Clough. Now I know you've got some kind of memories of meetings with Cloughie and interactions with Cloughie, and I think it kind of shows how much of an interest he took in all levels of Forest. How did you get started at Forest, and what kind of football education did that give you?
Well, it's quite interesting that you've mentioned Brian Clough, because my son's just come in and says, "Dad, you're not going to do that Brian Clough accent, are you?" Because he thinks when I talk, when I do some co-commentary, I turn to Brian Clough. I don't know why, but it's a little bit different. But through schoolboy football, you play for your city, you play for the county, and that's when the scouts start to come. And fortunate for me, it was Nottingham Forest. At that time, they were a very successful football club under obviously the great Brian Clough. They had some unbelievable players at the time, and I was lucky to sign schoolboy forms, and I had some fantastic years there as well.
Yeah, and just in terms of kind of his character, and so many people, so many young kids fall by the wayside, don't they, when it comes to youth football? We hear every year of, 98% of kids never make it to a first team. And I know, obviously, you moved on to Leeds and did your YTS at Leeds as well. But how difficult was it for you as a young footballer in the 1980s at a club like Forest who, had these years of success?
You know what? It was... I think probably at that time I didn't find any football difficult. I'd never got injured, and I just played. I played as a striker up at Forest, and it was just one of those things because I'd captained my city, I'd captained the county, and obviously you progress. I played for the divisional side, and I'd been on England trials and coaching courses, so I was quite a confident young man. So going to Nottingham Forest and teaming up with, if you like, back then there were probably guys from all over the country that was, at Forest at that time. It was just a great occasion to, to pick pit your wits against some of the, the best players around.
Yeah, and after that, you moved on and you made a couple of appearances for Leeds, having signed for them as a professional, your first professional contract, and then Wolves. At that point, do you ever lose faith that you might not make it? I mean, you kind of bounced about a bit. Wolves, like I say, Cambridge United, Crewe, a bit of non-league, I think, with Pontefract, your couple of appearances there, a couple of appearances at Bury, Northwich. It feels a very unorthodox kind of football career. It's not a kind of, once you're in the game, that's it. You're either on a trajectory or you plateau, but you stay at a league level. Did you ever lose confidence that dream that you'd had as a kid to become a footballer would eventually die?
No, I think I never lost confidence. It was frustrating because it was the injuries that crept up on me. I had my first injury playing against Blackburn in the reserves, and I tore my cartilage, and that set me back. That set me back about 6 or 7 months at Leeds. And I got back, and I think I'd made my substitute debut under Eddie Gray. And then that season, I went and broke my leg. So that set me back another, 6 months as well. So trying to get over that, and then I'd made my full debut under Billy Bremner. Eddie had been sacked. So it was that not getting a chance to continue to play, because there were either summer or the other, and it was just down to injuries that seemed to just follow me around all the way through my career.
Yeah, and you mentioned a couple of big characters there in Gray and Bremner. I guess as a young footballer, you kind of really rely on those experiences, don't you, that you get under those managers. I mean, those two had been mainstays in that, those brilliant Leeds sides who'd won everything, and, regardless of what Cloughy felt of their ability to achieve those, in the right way. What kind of managers were they, and how did they perhaps compare to, Brian Clough at Forest and, Sir Alex Ferguson coming along a bit later? Did you kind of, not all great players make great managers, but I guess you take something from each of their experiences?
Yeah, well, between Eddie and Billy, there were two different managers. I mean, obviously Billy was the captain of the club, and he'd gone away and he'd done. I think he might have been at Hull, he'd been at Doncaster Rovers. But Eddie was probably, I would say, probably more like the modern day manager. He was calm, very tactical, and what he always expected, certainly from the young lads, that you didn't just go home. Like these days, we'll go home and play on the Xbox. Even on your days off, he used to expect you to come in and be with a ball. So Eddie was passionate about developing players. So, round about that time, there was an incredible crop of youngsters that I would say that Eddie at the time had developed. Billy was a little bit different. He brought in one or two players in from Doncaster, and so he wasn't bringing the players that Eddie had nurtured. So there was a massive difference, but they both obviously brought a lot to Leeds United. But I would say, Eddie would definitely have suited, the modern game.
Yeah, definitely. And just in terms of kind of, your career at that point, and you mentioned the injuries and things, did you ever kind of envisage kind of the status that you'd achieve at Burnley? I know we're going to talk about your time at Burnley a little later on, but I guess that kind of frustration of not being able to kind of show your potential, your worth, etc. Did you ever envisage that kind of, the next move may be the one that gets you there, and it may have taken you several moves to get to that Burnley level, but did you ever imagine that through all those injuries and then frustrations that you'd get to that level that, you're holding such high regard by the Burnley fans?
Well, firstly, I was a Leeds United fan. So to play for Leeds United and to walk into Ellen Road and see the characters, some of them were still around, and Eddie used to bring them in, like for a Friday session, your Mick Bates and David Darby came back and Peter Lorimer, and they were always my idols. So to be playing with players like that, and I played in the reserves at centre-back alongside Kenny Burns for a season. So to actually do that, it was immense. But to your point, I thought I was going to do it at Leeds United. I thought the injuries would phase out. but it wasn't to be. Like every young boy's dream. I think it was Sunday soccer on the at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. Watching Leeds United and the great Arsenal teams and Manchester United. I envisaged wearing that white and playing 200, 300 games for Leeds United. So, you just hope all the time. That's all I could have, really wished for and hoped for.
So you got your chance, Roger, at Burnley. I think, Justin, you have some questions about how that came about and the moment that Roger started playing for Burnley in his first few seasons. Yeah.
I mean, I'm interested to know how that transfer came about. Who made the call? What did they have to persuade you? What promises did they make?
Well, I was at Bury at the time, and Frank Casper, he was the assistant to Martin Dobson. So I was training with the first team. It was a strange one, actually, because I was training the first team, but Bury at that time had a really strong side. And I were playing in the reserves. I think I've been on the bench a couple of times. I might have made an appearance. And, I mean, as the story goes, I was in the first team squad at the time, and I was late for a meeting before the game, and that were it for me. Martin had then sent me out to Northwich on loan to the end of the season. And by the time I'd got back, Martin had lost a job, and I think Sam Ellis had come in. He obviously, he didn't want me. And then I was fortunate that Frank had seen me play, obviously playing in the reserves and training, and he brought me into Burnley. So that was just a stroke of luck, really. And to be honest, I can't thank Frank enough for that.
And that first period at Burnley was it frustrating for you? Yeah, I remember you played in quite a few different positions.
It was frustrating because I went there as a centre-back, and to be honest, I was at Bury as a centre-back. I played at Leeds as a centre-back. I played at Leeds as a right wing. I played at Leeds as a striker and in midfield. So I could play in a number of positions. But when I went to Burnley, I kind of adopted this style where I was this hard man, or try to be this hard man, and it just wasn't me. I could always recover. Not many people getting behind me. But it took a while, and I think just for the grace of God that I switched, and I started playing in midfield, and then that switch to up front kind of settled me down a bit, where I could use the talents that got me actually into professional football.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the 90-91 season before we get onto the glory of the following season, because I think that is a really pivotal season for Burnley Football Club. It was like the first sort of hint of any kind of level of success after the dark times of the 80s. Despite the fact that we eventually missed out on promotion, we finished sixth. Obviously, we lost to Torquay in the playoffs. But we're only sort of 4 years out from when the club nearly went out of the Football League. So I'm interested to know what was the mood like at the club at the time? Was it somewhere that felt like really good times were just around the corner, or was it a surprise that we got into the playoffs that year?
Yeah, now you've mentioned it, I thought we finished higher, but you're right, we finished sixth. I think we started slow that season. I think Frank had moved me around, and I think he'd pushed John Francis out wide, and I twinned with Ron Futcher. Yeah, the mood weren't bad. Like what you were saying, there was rumbles. If we could win 1, 2, 3 games on the trot, but I think it was the back end of the season where it started going well for us. There were an absolutely fantastic team spirit. Ron Futcher was quite pivotal in that. Everybody at that time, there were Ron, there was Ray Deakin, who were the experienced players, Joey Jacob. And it's quite interesting because Frank relied on them a lot. Frank was a fantastic coach, a fantastic manager, but he had the experienced players that kind of just sort of got everything going, really, that season.
That was certainly your best season at Burnley up to that point. I think you scored 10 goals that season, even though you didn't start that many games until the sort of second half of the season. Was that where it all started to click with you playing up front? Was that like your breakthrough year?
Yeah, I would. Do you know what I would say? So I were a little bit frustrated that I didn't play more. I mean, the club had paid money for John. I was frustrated, don't get me wrong. I wanted to play. I think I could have played earlier and probably contributed a lot more earlier. But do you know what? You know, sometimes you have to bide your time. And I did. And it did all come together. Like I said earlier, they shuffled the front line. They brought Stevie Harper in. And it seemed to work well because we were all quick. Ron Futcher had the know-how, the experience, and he could score goals. And me and Ron were big mates, and he were my room partner, and you know what? He kind of nurtured me, to be honest. So I owe a lot to Futch as well, you know.
And what was Frank Casper like as a manager? Was he sort of a tactician or a motivator or all those things?
Yeah, Frank was. You know what? Frank was very similar to Eddie Gray. I mean, obviously, with Frank's career, the way Frank could play, you know, we used to see him in training. He used to take the shooting practice, and he was second to none. So, you know, we had the utmost respect for him, and he had the respect for us. It was absolutely fantastic. Tactical, brilliant. First, he worked with Mick Doherty. It worked quite well, and then he brought in Jimmy, which there were two different characters. And I think it did work for a period, you know, time that.
Yeah, but then we sort of get to the end of that season, the disappointment of losing in the playoffs, and then quite a lot of those old stages, the veterans that you've mentioned before, players like you know, Ron Futcher, Neil Grucock, who's a big name in Burnley's history, Ray Deakin and Steve Davis, the first Steve Davis, they all they all leave at the end of that season. What was the mood around that? Was that kind of a negative at the time, or was it felt that like there was a new broom needed and a bit of a freshening up of the squad just to get we over the line? Because I think we only missed out on actual automatic promotion by a point that year.
Yeah, if I'm honest, I don't think they needed a new broom. Sometimes at the end of the season, you don't know why players leave. You know, certainly, all the players that you've mentioned. In my opinion, if like Ray left, Ray Deakin, I would have loved to see Ray stay at the club. You know, if Ray had been youth team manager, that'd have been absolutely fantastic. And I do know that Futch, they wanted him to stay, but if Futch had stayed, Mike Conroy wouldn't have probably come in. So, you know, it did work, but it was sad to see some of these older players go because they were absolutely fantastic.
I think there was a Steve Davis left and another Steve Davis arrived that summer, if I'm right. Yeah.
Do you know what? I forgot about Swede, the Steve Davis, because blimey, he was a captain. He was just absolutely brilliant around the ground. So we had a real mix of gentlemen, jokers, you know, absolutely brilliant. But when they all came together, the likes of Steve Davis, who was the captain, you know, he led by example, did Steve? He was absolutely fantastic.
Chris, I know that season, 91-92, we all have fond memories of that. Some of us will have been at York City for that famous night where Roger, I believe, was wearing a very sharp suit that night, if I remember. But
I think, I don't know if you're allowed to say it, were a bit of a flasher mat that I had on. I had me the trench coat, which was trendy back then.
But Chris, you've got some, you know, fond memories of that time. I think you were working at the Burnley Express by then, were you?
Not quite. Well, I was 16 the summer of '91. You always say like your favourite music of that period sticks with you, and certainly the football of that period sticks with me certainly. But remember, obviously Steve, you know, the second Steve Davis come in, and as a young man from Southampton, and I say obviously Mickey Conroy arrived, and but before that, it all there was a certain trip to Russia, wasn't there, Roger?
Yeah, that was interesting. Very interesting. Actually, I found some. The only pictures that I actually, well, I think I must have taken about 1,000 pictures, but there were only two that possibly came out. And I found them the other day, and do you know what? It brings back a lot of memories. It was, I would say, getting there was grim, but the hotel was grim, the food was grim, but that's what set the season off because we only had ourselves. We trained, we played, but there was nothing else to do. I mean, some of the boys like to drink the vodka, but apart from that, that's when we all got together, and I thought that's when the strength and the bonding started. Obviously, that took us through to that season.
Yeah. How did the trip come about? Was that something that the chairman organised, or you'd had an offer from, was it Dynamo Stavropol? I think you played.
Yeah, I think the season before, I think we might have played a Russian team, but there was some connection. But to be honest, I'm pleased that I went because the Russian people were absolutely great. I mean, to see 15 to 20 lads walking down the high street wearing shell suits, bright red shell suits, and then, Russian people following us because they'd probably never seen anything like it. It was brilliant, and they were so friendly. They were absolutely brilliant. The captain of Stavropol, a boy called Sergey, I remember, he were inviting us to his house. He were cooking meals for us. It were absolutely brilliant. And it kind of just shows that, we are all friends, aren't we, really? They were absolutely brilliant people, So from that side of it, it was a great experience.
Yeah. And I'd say, obviously, the start of the season, a bit up and down. And I think Andy Marriott and Mark Yates came in before a super win at Doncaster. But I think it was the defeat at Scarborough. And then all of a sudden, Frank was on his way, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was an interesting one. I think it was a bit out of the blue. I think at that time, that might have been the first time Graham Lancashire started scoring, which were great. But we were expected to beat Scarborough. It were a bit noisy when we were in the dressing room. The Claret fans, they weren't happy. I wasn't really sure what went on. I was disappointed when Frank left. I really was. I think most of the boys were. But it was certainly out of our control. We were disappointed because, at the end of the day, if a manager leaves, it's usually down to the players. And I think we knew that, no matter how he sets us up, we can still work hard. We can still, if you like, take us chances. And I think certainly that period, it probably got to Frank really, which was sad.
Let's say you were already this sort of band of brothers, if you will. But you mentioned Lanky came in and started scoring, and also he was yourself, John, and Mick Conroy. But something clicked, didn't it? Because obviously you went on a remarkable run of wins, and a run that sort of established you as the front runners, and you never really looked back.
Well, I think what it was, I mean, with Frank, the way Frank had set us up, I mean, we like to keep the ball with Frank, but with Jimmy, he straight away changed it. I mean, we had pace up front. There were myself, Mike Conroy, John Francis, and Stevie Harper, and we went direct when we could. So, to be fair to Jimmy, you were very, very clever, very tactical. Because if anybody came in tight, we knew where the fullbacks were going to play it, and it would be in the channel. And John, obviously, with his pace, and Stevie Harper, and if me and Mickey were ever in those wide positions, I think even in that season, we were probably setting up chances for each other, So it was the pace that did it, and it was the switch that Jimmy made, which were really pivotal, to be honest.
Yeah, and obviously people remember, like John Deary, a fantastic servant for the club. But you look at, I always remember looking at the quality that Eddie Randall had, and thought he could have played a lot higher, maybe.
Yeah, I think I played against Eddie a few times when he were at Aldershot, and you could see back then he was so talented. I think just before he came to us, he'd been at Sheffield Wednesday, and I think they were just short of signing him because, I mean, he had immense talent. He was absolutely incredible. probably could have been a little bit more switched on. I don't think he realised how good he was. But he certainly was a talented player. He really was. Probably just missed, not starting at a top club with a little bit of discipline, because he shouldn't have been playing in the 4th division, that's for sure, you know.
Yeah, is that the nickname, Spaceman?
Yeah, that's another nickname by John Deary. But his nickname was Eric. We used to call him Eric after Eric Cantona because he was just so similar in looks as well at that time, you know. So every time we seen him, it was just Eric, you know. So do you know what? He was a pleasure to play and train with because he had real talent. He really did.
I can remember. Where did Loafy come from then?
Well, I think that were a Blackpool nickname. Yeah, so he came to Burnley with that nickname. I think something about his hairstyle was shaped like a loaf of bread. I don't know where they got that one from, you know.
He's one of I can remember not long after I'd started at the paper, and I was with my boss Edward at the time, and Edward had said, "Oh, can I have 2 minutes, John, after the game?" And he just said, "Listen, just write what the hell you want. Just don't make me look like a see you next Tuesday sort of thing." It's good value, but I see. Look at that. So the sort of real standout moments, sort of obviously as a team, but personally, I mean, for yourself, I remember that remarkable game with Blackpool at Turf Moor, and that magnificent goal you scored, and obviously everyone remembers the header past Peter Shilton, who a couple of years earlier was playing in a World Cup semi-final. But they sort of stand out for you as well.
Yeah, they do. I mean, the season before, actually, when we played Blackpool, I think we beat them. I think we beat them 2-0. Yeah, I think we beat them 2-0. I mean, those games against Blackpool, certainly at Turf Moor, are all big occasions. And that day where I was fortunate to score that goal, stand out because obviously there were a big rivalry, probably not just with the clubs, with teammates, the guy at the back, Gary Briggs, and we did like to, if you like, wind each other up. So yeah, there were rivalry. It was great to score that game because I think there were two teams that were going for promotion or were tipped for promotion, and obviously the FA Cup goal against Peter Shilton. Do you know what? It was the cross that made it. That's all I'm going to say. Mike's cross were absolutely fantastic.
But I think everyone remembers one of the opposition lads that day. There was a certain Ted McMinn played for Derby and won a lot of people's hearts that day, and obviously ended up at Burnley a couple of years later. But so he was a different class on and off the pitch, wasn't he, Roger?
Yeah, he was. He's another one, isn't he? He's one of them players, and you kind of think you can see why he played in the Scottish Premier. He was a fantastic footballer. And he was obviously at Derby. Yeah, what a player. Unfortunately, I didn't get to play with him much at Burnley because, with my injury. Yeah, so I missed probably my time with Ted McMahon. I'd have loved to have played with him. I played a bit with Ayresy. David Ayres were another one as well, you see, who was an immense talent as well. And do you know what? I'm talking about these players, but players in that championship side, you've only got to train with them to realise how good they were. And somebody made a comment. It was Peter Smith. He said he looked back at some of the old videos back then, the footage, and he couldn't believe the talent on the pitch. And I suppose at that period of time, through Jimmy, through Frank, through the recruitment, they did bring some good players in, So I was fortunate to play with him.
Yeah, I'd say it was an exciting brand of football as well as the winning. Winning league's great as we all know, but just as we've seen this last season, it's nice when you can do it in a pleasing manner as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? It was actually nice to play that way because we knew that we would score goals, we knew that we'd create. I mean, John Deary were probably 10 goals a season, from midfield. And he's probably known as probably a holding midfield. So John used to chip in with goals. So we all knew that there were goals in us, and it was probably more an attacking format. It made it easier having, Big John Pender at the back and Stevie Davies, because them two were rocks. They were, even in training, the pair of them, there'd be no half measures with them, because they were physical boys, and the two fullbacks, so they made it easier. They created the platform for us, really, to be honest.
Yeah. And was there a moment you certainly just thought, this is us, we're champions now? I mean, there's obviously you've got to go out and do it, and there was the day at Carlisle and the night at York, but over the second half of that season, do you think we've cracked this, we're on our way?
Do you know what? I don't think. I think certainly through the previous year, but I don't think we were ever that confident. We just wanted to keep that momentum. We wanted to stay, at the summit. We wanted to be there, but I don't think there was anybody, to be honest, with that group of players. You could not be overconfident because, like we said, we were all like a band of brothers. But the banter in there, if anybody got above the station, they absolutely got, ripped, and that's what probably kept us all level-headed, which were absolutely fantastic, to be honest.
Yeah, and I presume that night at York still brings chills, does it? It's just the commentary. Obviously, everyone's seen the video. The Clive Tildesley commentary. They came to York in the thousands. They're going home as champions. It's still magnificent 30 odd years on.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. And watching a month or so back, watching Burnley get promoted, seeing that brought back that night at York, because, I mean, I walked in, I followed, because I were injured there, I followed the coach. So I walked down amongst, the Burnley supporters, and it was just absolutely incredible. It wasn't, it was just claret, wasn't it? It was just unbelievable around, Bootham Crescent. It was just fanatical. I think that's a word that I can use. And, my only sadness, even if I could have been on the bench and I could have got on there, or, even played, that was my only sadness. But do you know what? To be part of that, to see the supporters, it was incredible, absolutely incredible.
Yeah. So I think 17 goals for yourself and a title medal. It's not a bad year, is it?
Yeah. Do you know what? Am I pleased with that? Do you know what? I am pleased. I'm pleased to have made a contribution. Do you know what? Everybody likes scoring goals, but I equally got as excited of trying to create goals as well, to win penalties, to win free kicks, to give us a chance. These days, they're called assists. I would have been happy with them, because winning and getting Burnley promotion was. It's only when you finish and you realise, well, come on, Rog, you could have probably got 30 that season, or you could have got 25 the following season. But at that time, it's more to me about getting Burnley promoted and winning matches, And should I say, winning at all costs, because I liked a little bit of gamesmanship. I didn't mind that at all. I'd get pulled up for it these days, but no, certainly at that time, no, I wanted to win. And to be honest, at times, it were about winning. That's all I cared about.
Yeah. I say just the last one from me. Obviously, everyone remembers the era. Remember the haircut, the secret weapon T-shirt, the bird muck kit, shall we call it? But for it to get replicated last year, you even modelled it, didn't you, last summer? So that must have been a proud moment to be welcomed back for that.
Yeah, do you know what? I was fortunate yesterday in one of Burnley's greatest seasons. With Phil Bird, I did some co-commentary, which is always a pleasure and brilliant. And Veronica Simpson had me back for that unveiling of the shirt. And do you know what? I've been so fortunate, and to do that in a season, I was so proud. That kit stands the test of time, and for it, a similar kit to be promoted back into the Premiership is absolutely brilliant. Really good.
Yeah, at that time, me and Woody used to work in a textile warehouse just outside Burnley where they made that kit, and we used to get the offcuts from it. So we used to go on the turf wearing these things round us like bed sheets. They were like, but I mean, I'm just curious. At that time, around that time of that Derby game, especially, there was a kind of Eli mania was going on, wasn't there, amongst the Burnley fans? I mean, the chants you got the biggest chants for a while. Everyone, when you got the ball, there was a buzz about the place. I mean, you must have picked up on that. It seemed like, you'd instantly become the crowd favourite there. Did you feel that?
Do you know what? It was when you set out to be a footballer. Certainly, if you're a striker, because I was a striker, you practice your celebration, you practice your autograph, and you want to be recognised by supporters. So I actually got everything probably over those last 2 seasons, and that was me as a complete footballer. Of course, I would have liked then to have been in the top division and then getting in my car and then meeting up with the England party. But no, for me, being at Burnley at that time, that is everything that I dreamed of.
Yeah. And obviously, your career did end a little bit before it should have done with all the injuries. That must have been quite difficult to sort of handle on a personal level, having your career cut short, really. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. It's like I said, my first injury was at 18, and I managed to get what I got out of it. Do you know what? When I think back, it's hard to actually, to talk about it. Could I have done things different? I'm not sure. But I managed to get what I got out with not a lot of bend in my right knee. So I couldn't, I managed to adopt a running style and still manage to keep some pace. I would always ice it after every training session and every match. So what I got, and when I finished, it was disappointing, but to try and drag myself after coming back from China, it would have been far too hard because I were in far too much pain after matches and training sessions.
So you went and played in China, yeah?
Yeah, I went to play in China. It was great at the time because I was the biggest player on the pitch. It was brilliant. The Chinese boys were absolutely great. The people, again, like Russia, absolutely brilliant. And it's kind of strange because, they're wanting to know who we are. They, inviting us to the houses, giving us presents. They were absolutely brilliant. I am so, I would have, don't get me wrong, I'd have rather stayed at Burnley, of course I did, but I'm glad I did experience Chinese football and the culture. It was, that set me up to understanding that we are all the same. We all sit down, we sit down with the Chinese players. They used to teach us, the language. I used to teach them the English language. It was just absolutely fantastic.
And then when you've ended your football career, you moved into business. Is that right?
Yeah, but you know what? Before that, I mentioned shell suits in Russia. I probably sold those shell suits to the Burnley players because that's what I did when I played. So on the day off, we used to go up to Sunderland to a warehouse and we used to buy sports gear. Then we used to distribute it. That's another name for selling it. So that's where I got my, my first run into sort of business without the complications. It were fairly easy and fairly steady then. And then obviously when I retired, I went into business. It was textiles, like you mentioned, Simon, but it was top end worsted men's suitings. So we used to manufacture that with a good friend of mine who were a Burnley supporter, and I met Ken. I think we were playing Rochdale. It might be my second season, and we'd been friends for a good 20 years. So I went to university to learn a bit about textiles. Ken was already the textile designer, so we manufactured them and then sold them into Savile Row, Kensington, Regent Street, and exported as well. So I did that for a good few years. So I enjoyed that. I really did.
Let's just talk a little bit now, because you're mentioning working with Phil Bird on the co-coms for the Clarets player, and we've seen you around Turf Moor modelling the kits and being at the matches. Last season, I mean, we were talking about this on our first show about what did we expect out of that season with Vincent Kompany. When you saw such a massive turnover of players in the summer, so many good players leaving and then new faces come in, did you expect anything like what we got last season, and what were your impressions of that campaign?
Well, I was fortunate to do the first game of the season away from Huddersfield, and I think that myself and Phil, we both said that what an amazing turnaround with, so many different players in. But one thing for sure, that Vincent Kompany, he must have a really good recruitment network, because he brought those players, and the transition from one style, to his was very, very quick. From there, I've noticed he's a leader. People bought into him, and you could tell that something were brewing. Certainly that game, and the season that they had, it never stopped, did it? It was absolutely amazing, amazing.
And what about next season? Looking ahead, do you think they need to strengthen a lot, or is that squad good enough if they can? Obviously, there's loan players that they've got to sort out whether they're going to be staying or not. But do you think it's the core of that squad's good enough to stay up?
They've got a good core. Have they got the experience? I'm not sure. I would say they definitely need some experience. I'm not sure how the budget works and the wages, but they would definitely need. I would say they need a couple of strikers. Hopefully they can get Nathan Teller in, and I would say they probably need an experience or two midfield players. But that's just my opinion. But his recruitment is brilliant. So I would say he's probably 2 months, 3 months. If we're honest, we knew that the Clarets were going to get promoted. He's probably already working, and his connections with, obviously, Manchester City, and with his experience, and just the man himself, I'm pretty sure he'll do some really good loan deals as well.
Have you had a chance to meet him at all, Vincent?
No, unfortunately. I would love to meet him, but just seeing what he's doing at Burnley is absolutely fantastic, because, he comes across as, somebody that I'd love to have worked, under, and I'm pretty sure the young players there are relishing it, because I've read that they're back already, and that just shows, doesn't it? You've got to put in the hard work, and then you'll get the success. And it's going to be definitely hard next season, but I think they will get some success. I really do.
Yeah, and it's a positive attitude for him as well. You think they're going to go in and give it a go. It's not going to be battling down for survival from word go. I think it'll be going to be an interesting one. To finish off, Woody has got some quick fire questions. So just need some short answers to these, Roger. Just a little bit of fun to finish off with. Woody, away you go with your quick fire round.
Thanks. It's like a Striker Christmas album. So started off with which footballer, Roger, did you most want to be growing up, and which footballer would you want to be now?
Footballer growing up, like I said, I played in probably as a striker. Definitely, I used to love the Dutch. I used to love Johan Cruyff. Absolutely. I was fortunate to get his autograph. He stayed the Barcelona team stayed 5 minutes away from where I lived. They trained in Bradford when they were playing Leeds United. I'm not sure what year it was in the European Cup semi-final. So I got Cruyff, Neeskens, Johnny Rep. So it was definitely a Johan Cruyff, and obviously the Leeds players, Eddie Gray. Eddie Gray would have won.
Excellent. And what advice would you give your younger self about either being a footballer or a businessman, looking back on it today?
Well, certainly as from a footballer, it's a bit of a difficult one because, to be honest, I weren't a drinker. I always trained excessive, probably trained too much, maybe that. What I would do from a playing side is probably not get... I wish I hadn't have got into that old Leeds mode and become that physical player. I wish I'd have continued to carry on the way I started into the game and where I finished at Burnley, where my strengths were, what I did offer. That would be the only thing. Stay away from that physical side.
You're coming back on the coach from York, from Bootham Crescent, having just won the championship. What 2 songs are you putting on a playlist?
Well, 2 songs. Well, everybody. In fact, I used to get the moan and groans. I used to be into Luther Vandross and Freddie Jackson and all that love stuff. But it had to be Simply the Best by Tina Turner. I think the club were playing it at that time, and it was that period was Tina Turner Simply the Best, because the players at that time, that's all we strive for, to be the best. And I suppose we got promoted, we won the title, so the name's in the song, isn't it?
You kind of deserve it, absolutely. And if you could be remembered for just one thing?
I'd like to be remembered for one thing, that I gave everything. That's what I'd like to be remembered. I gave everything. I watch football now, and not everybody. And it's something Eddie Gray told me, that even him with his unbelievable skills, if his touch wasn't on the day, whatever you must always do is give everything. And if I can remember that I gave everything, I'll be happy with that.
Well, thanks very much indeed for that, Roger. That's been a really, really fascinating 50 minutes or so we've had there. Really enjoyable to go down memory lane a little bit and also touch upon Burnley at the moment. I think on behalf of all the team here, thanks very much indeed for your time. And hopefully during the Premier League season, we can maybe come back on another time and review how things are going for Vincent and the boys.
Oh, absolutely. I kept it clean there, by the way, didn't I? I kept it clean. I didn't tell any stories. But no, absolutely brilliant, guys. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to do anything for Burnley. I really enjoy it.
All right. All the best. And we'll be back soon with another episode of From the BO End, available on all the podcast channels that you love. And we're also on Twitter and Facebook and other channels coming soon. Thanks very much indeed, and speak to you again soon.